Good evening. This is Joanne Nodal with the Keep Pearland Beautiful, and I'm also with the Brazoria County Master Gardeners. And tonight's presentation is going to be on Master Gardeners and Master Composting. And I wanted to tell you, take it just a minute before we get started while people are joining to tell you about the Brazoria County Master Gardeners. The Brazoria County Master Gardeners is an affiliate of the Brazoria County AgriLife Extension Office, and we are a volunteer group, and we have obtained hours of education in different areas of gardening and expertise, with a focus on gardening in Brazoria County. And our mission is to share what we've learned with Brazoria County citizens and help you make the most of your backyard gardens. And whether you're interested in vegetable, fruits, flowers, whatever, we have people in our group who have expertise in all different areas, and we want to help you become a better gardener in Brazoria County. So tonight we have with us Ellen Pettish, who's a master gardener with Brazoria County, and Ellen has many years of experience as a master composter, and she's going to tell you about composting tonight. Ellen, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Joanne. Good evening. My name is Ellen Pettish. I'm a master gardener and a master composter. Several years ago, I attended a composting class in Pearland. Keep Pearland Beautiful and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality sponsored the program. Since then, I have been certified as a master composter by the Texas Commission. To be certified, I read for 30 hours and kept a record of the books I read. I also did community outreach for 30 hours throughout Brazoria County and gave presentations to master gardener classes such as this one. And 3 years ago, I attended a 3-day advanced compost program in Rosenberg, which I will comment on later.
Yeah. What? It's not going. What's happening?
My presentation this evening is based on information from both the Keep Pearland Beautiful program and the Texas A&M pamphlet titled, Don't Bag It, Compost It. I will first give you information about the extent that backyard composting contributes to the reduction of backyard waste going into the landfills, and then speak about the science of composting. After that, I will talk about the actual process of building your own composting pile that will benefit you and your garden. In closing, I will offer some general safety guidelines that we follow at our master gardening site. The 5 topics for my composting presentation today are decomposition, composting fundamentals, composting structures, building and maintaining a compost pile, using compost. After dealing with the main topics, I will address the use of mulch, such as pine needles, hay, and leaves, which is different from compost. My first subject is decomposition. Today, solid waste management is one of the most prominent environmental issues facing Texas. Our landfills are filling up rapidly. Texans generate about 6 pounds of solid waste per person per day. Statewide, that's 30 million tons of waste a year. We have recycling programs which help slow the flow of waste into the landfills. None of them are free. Municipalities pay millions of dollars for recycling and landfills. However, finding markets for recyclables and voluntary participation remain obstacles to the success of these programs. 95% of what we throw away is recyclable, yet less than 20% is actually being recycled. Environmental regulations have made the cost of building a landfill to be quite expensive. Costs range from approximately $350,000 to $1 million per acre to build a new site. Organic landscape materials, including leaves, woody trimmings, and grass clippings account for 20% of a community's annual waste. In the fall, this may account for 50% of the incoming landfill volume. With the exception of large woody brush, residents can recycle all the organic materials in their own yards by composting, mulching, and grass recycling. By recycling these materials, we save both landfill space and money. At the same time, we improve our general environment and, of course, contribute to the health of our gardens. HGAC, the Houston-Galveston Area Council, is the regional organization of several counties, including Brazoria County, through which local governments consider issues and cooperate in solving area-wide problems. We are grateful at Bees for HGAC's generous education grant to us for such things as the construction of our education center, wire cages and fences for our compost area, and our cemetery display of long-lasting waste, such as soda cans and a literally permanent existence of styrofoam trash. In the past, I participated as a presenter in a worthwhile HGAC roundtable in Houston to discuss waste disposal and the corresponding necessity of composting. The lead reviewer represented a Harris County waste disposal company. The second speaker spoke about the progress in separating waste and compost material in the city of West University Place. The third promoted ground-level educational methods. As the fourth speaker, I gave a short version of backyard composting similar to today's presentation. Decomposition is a natural process. Organic matter adds valuable nutrients to the soil, improves the condition of our soil, helps insulate the soil from temperature extremes, and helps plants survive dry periods by holding moisture in our soil. We can improve our environment and be part of the cycle of life by composting. But what is compost? It is the mixture that is obtained from controlled decomposition of organic material through biological processes, with the end result being a nutrient-rich humus. The word compost comes from the Latin words com, which means together, and ponere, which means to place. Composting is putting together a mixture of vegetable residue, soil, and water to form humus. A variety of different organic materials makes the best compost. Why should we compost? We compost to use our organic landscape materials and to make humus to improve our soil. Every person who has landscape plants should be composting organic material. One can simply pile organic materials in an out-of-the-way place in the backyard and let them decompose on their own, or build a compost bin to accelerate the composting process. Compost will improve the productivity of your soil and the growth of the plants in your yard. By composting, we are participating in a natural process. As a natural process, composting has been taking place since the beginning of life on this planet. Early man no doubt learned to use manure and planted in soil enriched by natural decay. Historians have traced composting and the use of compost to the Romans over 2,000 years ago. An important advance in the practice of composting was made by Sir Albert Howard about 100 years ago in India. He had a system of composting called the indoor method, named after the city where he worked. Howard stacked layers of animal manure, garbage, sewage sludge, leaves, and straw to a height of 5 feet and placed the materials in special pits 2 to 3 feet deep. He turned the material 2 times in 6 months and recirculated the water that drained from it to keep the pile moist. The indoor layering method has been used in other countries, and Sir Albert Howard has been called the father of composting for English-speaking people. Others did research on aerobic decomposition and reported their discoveries on the influence of temperature, the rate of decomposition, the role of individual groups of microorganisms, particle size, and the carbon to nitrogen ratio. In the 1950s, J.R. Rodell published Organic Gardening and promoted aerobic backyard composting. To begin backyard composting, use the material in your home and yard: leaves, grass, weeds, fruit and vegetable trimmings, coffee grounds, and all matter that comes from plants. A mixture of different materials is good because plants take up elements from the earth and we want to return them to the earth. Think of how you can get materials for your compost bin. I save my kitchen trimmings such as coffee grounds, eggshells, and apples and vegetable trimmings. I also use yard clippings and collect bags of leaves and grass clippings that my neighbors put out on the street. Some of my neighbors deliver bags of leaves to me, and others call me when they have leaves. However, exercise normal caution. You may unintentionally be picking up someone's garbage. A gentle kick on the side of a bag can tell you if it is full of sticks or other hard material. Years ago, I would knock on the front door of a neighbor and ask if I may take their leaves. Now I have leaf friends. The decomposition process is gradual and complex. It involves anaerobic and aerobic decomposition. Anaerobic decomposition, such as the stack method of Albert Howard in India, takes place naturally in marshes and in places that do not have much oxygen. Anaerobic decomposition is usually accompanied by disagreeable odors of hydrogen sulfide. This process does not generate much heat, and so the pathogenic organisms take 6 months to a year to disappear. This takes place in a landfill. Aerobic decomposition, promoted by Texas A&M, is the breakdown of organic materials in the presence of oxygen. This is most common in nature and takes place on ground surfaces where droppings from animals and trees change into humus. In aerobic decomposition, living organisms feed upon the organic matter. The organisms are already on the leaves, apple peels, watermelon rinds, etc. These organisms use the nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, other elements, and air and water to grow. Some of the organisms die, and their stored nitrogen and carbon become food for other organisms. As the organisms grow, excess carbon is converted to carbon dioxide, and therefore the amount of carbon is reduced. During composting, a great deal of heat is released in oxidation of carbon to carbon dioxide. Expect the temperature to rise to 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature goes above 160 degrees, the bacterial activity slows down. But don't worry, that won't happen naturally. It will not catch on fire. Aerobic decomposition produces no objectionable odor. Turning the material at intervals to add oxygen is useful to maintain aerobic conditions. What are the requirements for efficient decomposition? Decomposition of organic materials depends on maintaining microbes. We want to keep microbes growing, and we need air, water, carbon, and nitrogen. Ground leaves contain carbon, and green material contains nitrogen. To get air into the pile, we mix the pile once or twice a month and put the material from the top on the bottom and the material from the bottom on the top. To get water into the pile, we add enough water as we are turning it so that the mixture is as wet as a wrung-out sponge. A particle size of 1 inch diameter is the best, but don't worry if you can't cut up your material that small. Just keep in mind that small particles decompose much more rapidly than large particles. Size matters. You can use a chipper shredder, your lawnmower, or hand clippers. At home, my husband uses a lawnmower to set low to the ground to shred the leaves that I collect from the neighborhood, as well as to cut up my garden clippings and kitchen scraps. What is involved in the process of composting? The organisms in a compost pile are first, second, and third level decomposers. Some of these are fungi, bacteria, actinomycetes, earthworms, snails, flies, springtails, mites, beetles, roundworms, protozoa, ground beetles, centipedes, ants, and flatworms. The activities of one group complement those of another group. This continues until a state of balance is reached when the material becomes humus. The outer layer, 2 inches to 6 inches in thickness, will not be as hot as the inner layer. Turning the pile to put the upper layer on the bottom and the outer layer on the inside helps the process. First level consumers are tracked and become food for second level consumers, and second-level consumers attract and become food for third-level consumers. Bacteria, the first-level consumers in a compost pile, are so small that 25,000 bacteria laid end to end would take up only 1 inch on a ruler. An amount of garden soil the size of a pea may contain 1 billion bacteria. The lifespan of one generation of bacteria is 20 to 30 minutes. One cell may yield a progeny of billions of individuals in half a day. They can produce a variety of enzymes to digest material. Bacteria cannot escape an environment that becomes unfavorable. A decrease in temperature of the pile or a sharp change in acidity can make the bacteria inactive or kill them. When the environment of a pile changes, the bacteria that formerly dominated may be decimated by another species. Bacteria are the champion microscopic decomposers of the compost pile, and earthworms are the heavyweights. An earthworm has a gizzard which grinds material prior to digestion. The digestive juices are rich in hormones and enzymes. The matter that passes out of the earthworm's body is the richest and finest quality of all humus material. Humus is the dark part of the soil. It is the result of partial decay of organic material, such as leaves. The rest becomes food for earthworms. Don't worry about trying to find worms for your compost pile. Worms are naturally in our soil unless you use a high amount of insecticide, which can kill them. Humus comes from the Latin word meaning earthy. The word humble comes from the same source. A person who is humble is earthy. Also, we say gardening is a humbling experience. Yes, it is earthy and humbling. I wish that they had a category at the county fair for the best earthworms. My third subject is composting structures. A holding unit is a structure you can make out of wood, wire, concrete blocks, or wooden pallets. Ideally, the structure should hold 1 cubic yard of material, that is 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. You can also place organic material in a pile and simply incorporate your compost material directly into your garden soil. The use of holding units differs from turning units in that the organic material in a holding unit usually is not turned, and it takes longer to produce compost. We also have holding units such as a garbage can with holes in it or a horizontal barrel on a stand that can be rotated. But a garbage can has a somewhat limited capacity, and its compost material cannot be turned over easily. Barrel drums are fairly popular, but similar to a garbage can, volume may be limited and compost worms will not be present.
Hey, Ellen, one of the things that's popular today on YouTube
Yes,
is they have this concept of using a garbage can.
Yes.
I saw the example garbage can and poking holes in it.
yes,
And then they say that you can just lay it on its side
yeah.
and kind of kick it and roll
Right.
it down the yard.
Oh, that sounds good.
Would
Kick
that
the can.
would work?
Kick the can. Yes.
Kick the can.
Right.
Yeah, that would work.
That sounds good. Yeah. You-
Okay.
you don't have to go and buy anything, really.
Use what you have.
Right. Don't worry about trying to find worms for your compost pile. Worms are natural in our soil unless you use a high amount of insecticide, which can kill them. Humus comes from the Latin word meaning earthy. The word humble comes from the same source. A person who is humble is earthy. Also, we say gardening is a humbling experience. Yes, it is earthy and humbling. I wish they had a category at the county fair for the best
Did we just
earthworms.
do that?
Mhm.
We missed-
My third subject is composting structures.
I think you forgot to turn the
You
page.
forgot to say the page. Or turning the other side. We did turn it. Okay.
A holding unit is a structure you can make out of wood, wire, concrete blocks, or wooden pallets. Ideally, the structure should hold 1 cubic yard of material, that is 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. You can place organic material in a pile and simply incorporate your compost material directly into your garden soil. The use of holding units differs from turning units in that the organic material in a holding unit usually is not turned, and it takes longer to produce compost. We also have holding units such as a garbage can with holes in it, or a horizontal barrel on a stand that can be rotated. But a garbage can has a somewhat limited capacity, and its compost material cannot be turned over easily. Barrel drums are fairly popular, but similar to a garbage can, volume may be limited and compost worms will not be present. Turning units. Next, we have turning units. At B's, we have an open-ended concrete block turning unit with 3 bins to move the compost down the line. You can make similar 3-bin turning units using wooden pallets. At home, Paul uses 3 fence wire cylindrical turning units to move the compost from bin to bin. In each case, the ideal size for each cylindrical bin is approximately 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. If you use concrete blocks, leave about ½ inch between each block to let the air in. My 4th subject is building and maintaining a compost pile. First and obvious, choose a location for making your compost accessible to your garden and kitchen. I recommend using a collection bin to begin the composting process. At home, I put my vegetable trimmings in a plastic freezer bag overnight to help break down the outer cell wall. Also, cutting and shredding both kitchen and yard material helps accelerate the decomposition. Use a collection bin to hold compost material until it breaks down enough to begin filling a compost turning unit. When your collection bin is full, move its contents into a turning unit and add water to keep the pile from drying out. At home, Paul adds leaves to a portion of the collection pile and runs over it several times with a lawnmower prior to putting the material into a turning unit. He repeats this process until the collection bin is empty. Within a few days, the pile in the turning unit should reach the desired temperature of 90 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and the composting process will continue. To speed up the process, turn the pile every month or so into a second turning unit while adding water. You will find that the material in the turning unit has become somewhat compressed and that it will be difficult to turn over the material inside the container. Having a second and third turning unit on hand will make it possible for you to dig out the compost from top to bottom from one unit to another. A compost pile may take 3 to 6 months to be ready for your garden. That means that you need to have a couple of units holding working compost at various stages. Thoroughly decomposed compost should look like dark, crumbly soil mixed with small pieces of not readily identified organic material. Environmental factors include moisture and temperature. Too much water will displace the air. Too much air, such as the wind, will displace the water. Some things will kill your microorganisms and earthworms. So obviously, anything that kills or inhibits the growth of microorganisms should be kept out of the pile. Things to keep out of the compost pile are bug spray, fertilizers, weed killers, and petroleum products. Don't use cat litter or dog droppings. Also, do not use material from a farmer who has a license to use long-lasting pesticides or herbicides. Will I get pests in the pile? Don't use oil or fat. Flies can be pests. If you have flying pests, you can cover your pile with dry leaves or newspapers. Remember that pesky animals seek food, water, and shelter. Finished compost is black gold for your soil. The pH of compost is near neutral. It has low levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium and acts like slow-release fertilizer. It also attracts earthworms who tunnel through and aerate the soil and bring minerals up from the subsoil. Compost is ready when the original organic materials are no longer recognizable and no longer generating heat. My 5th subject is using compost. To use compost, put 1 inch to 2 inches of compost on top of your soil and then incorporate it into the top 6 to 10 inches. Don't put compost in individual holes. Spread it. Additionally, you can use leaves as mulch on top of your compost. Put them around the main part of the plant, 3 inches high on the soil. and extend the leaves 3 to 4 times the canopy spread of the plant. But don't let the leaves touch the stem of the plant. Let's review. You need 4 things for composting. Carbon is brown materials such as leaves. Nitrogen is green materials such as kitchen and yard trimmings. Air is what we breathe. Water is what comes from the sky, a hose, or rain barrels. Now I'll mention some of the resources available here. Use the internet to connect to the Texas A&M website. Check out the Houston Chronicles garden section every Saturday. Go to your local library and borrow gardening books and magazines. I recommend the Texas Gardener. Visit our county agri-life office. The people there are always very helpful. And of course, you can learn about your areas of interest from all our master gardeners. I have with me some compost from my backyard. It has no disagreeable odor, and there may be some small sticks in the compost. That is because they often get through the shredder and are slow to break down. But don't worry, the sticks will actually provide breathing space for roots and worms. Now I will talk about working in the compost areas. I certainly do not promote specific approaches and methods for backyard gardening. Rather, I will simply show you how I work with homemade compost, city mulch, and neighborhood leaves. Also, I will introduce some basic safety practices. Here are 2 examples of how I use mulch and leaves. First, I put 6 layers of wet newspaper on the ground around the tree to discourage weeds from coming through. Then I spread mulch from the city of Lake Jackson on top of the newspapers. Notice that I did not make a volcano of mulch up the tree trunk. The bark should not be covered. Otherwise, animals and mold can attack and help rot the tree. The other photo shows my rose garden in its early stages. In this case, I put compost around the plants and covered the ground with leaf mulch. Similar to the rose garden, I cover my blackberry patch with compost, mulch, and then leaves. Sometimes I use hay for mulch. The Lake Jackson mulch site is on the road south of the hospital. The workers there are very friendly. There's no fee. All you need is your driver's license to show that you are a Lake Jackson resident. I will now address health and safety procedures. Of course, you are all experienced and careful. We don't have a lot of strict rules, but we certainly promote good practices. We strongly encourage you to always wear gloves of your choice. You never know when a sharp or thorny item may be in a pile. Although it is unlikely in a proper compost pile, you don't want to unexpectedly grab something that you don't want to touch. At Bees, we also strongly advise you to always wear sturdy, closed-toed shoes. We are not the shoe police. Don't worry, a compost pile is relatively safe, but it isn't your lawn. You might think about wearing or bringing your long sleeve shirt if you will be working in the sun or around thorns. This is like preaching to the choir. Of course, you will protect yourself in varying degrees when you garden at home, go fishing, or mow your lawn. At Bees, it's a good idea to have a kit or a bag with your gloves, glasses, sunscreen, and hat. The head house is the work center of Master Garden operations, a place for the support facilities needed to run an efficient undertaking. It is north of the greenhouse, a place for phone calls, lunches, and breaks, and has a refrigerator and a sink. Our head house also has a first aid station. My last few slides are about composting with kids. In your own backyards, composting can involve the entire household. Skip Richter of Texas Agri-Life offers a worthwhile PowerPoint pamphlet that can be very useful for your children and grandchildren. Richter shows that enriching the soil with compost can be both easy and fun. This rectangular bin being set up by the girls appears to be approximately 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. The kids will then be able to easily put in material for composting. With an open bin, they can later turn over the pile, add compost material and water. Eventually, they will fill up the bin with compost ready for removal and use. 4 containers of leaves provide carbon. 1 container of mixed kitchen and lawn green stuff provides nitrogen. Don't worry about weighing or measuring. The dried up brown material tends to be loose, and the fresh green material is generally denser and heavier. Kids and some of us older folks don't need to completely rake up a whole lawn just to fill one compost pile. In fact, leaving some leaves on your lawn over the winter time can protect against frost and give you nice growth in the spring. In addition to grass clippings and apple cores, potato skins from the kitchen also contain useful amounts of nitrogen and can be dumped into the bin. You may soon see volunteer earthworms. If you use one large open bin instead of 2 or 3 smaller containers, a kid can turn and soak each layer as it fills with compost material. I also strongly recommend staying out of range if a child or spouse is manning the hose. Remember, for compost, you need carbon, nitrogen, water, and air. We now have a good compost pile and a happy family. I will now introduce you to hugelkultur. It is a German word for long-standing practice in Europe that has recently gained the attention of our gardeners. It consists of composting whole decaying trees while cultivating a garden. This takes place naturally in a forest. At home, you simply lay down rows with large pieces of rotting wood for long-term humus building. The composting takes place below ground level, while at the same time allowing you to cultivate a raised or sunken bed. Plants are naturally able to take advantage of the nutrients released during decomposition. I plan to do this in our compost area at Bees someday. In closing, I brought with me 2 items for a brief show and tell. Compost in a bag and liquid humus. My haiku. Don't till anymore. You just apply your compost. Lazy gardener. My summary is 10 reasons why I compost. 1. I participate in a process that has been taking place since the beginning of plant life on our planet. 2. I can put my kitchen trimmings from fruits and vegetables into my compost pile. 3. I can make compost that has beneficial fungi and bacteria. 4. I like adding my yard clippings to the compost pile. 5. If I don't feel like turning the pile, I can make cold compost, which is more nitrogen than hot compost. 6. I know that my compost has nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and a pH value near neutral. 7. Since I put a variety of material in my compost pile, the compost has trace elements. 8. I know my earthworms will benefit from the humus, the organic material remaining after the major portion of plant and animal matter has decomposed. 9. When I give my plants this humus, I know the plants will receive a slow-release fertilizer. 10. Now my earthworms continue to fertilize my garden with their worm castings. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Happy composting.
Ellen, I got a couple of questions for you.
Yes.
One is the liquid humus that you showed. How do you use that?
It has directions on the back about adding it to water.
And then, okay, and applying it to your garden?
Yes, and that was presented to me when I went to the Fort Bend County composting class.
Okay.
That was something that the speaker presented.
And how does this differ from just using compost in your garden?
It's something that has been developed outside of my yard, right? And some people don't want to make compost.
So this would be something that you could buy at Lowe's or the garden center.
Yes.
If you didn't want to spend the time making compost.
Right. Or you could add it to your compost pile.
Or you could add it to your compost pile. And then another question for you. When I first learned composting, whoever taught me, it wasn't you. The first time I learned it, they made it sound like it was very important to get exactly the right amount of kitchen scraps and then a layer of leaves, and there was a ratio. But when I talk to you and when I work with you out at Bees, your compost is wonderful and you don't seem to worry too much about proportions.
No, I don't. because I see that it breaks down eventually. And also, in that program I went to in Fort Bend County, and Skip Richter does this too. If you have I use 5 flower pots, 4 of leaves and 1 of green.
Okay.
And so that gives you an idea.
Okay. 4 of leaves and 1 green. So
Yes.
it would be a 4-to-1 ratio.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
That makes it easy.
Yeah. And you always have a lot more leaves or brown material than you do of your kitchen scraps and stuff. So that would really make it easy.
Big thing I think that helps here is putting my kitchen scraps in a plastic bag and putting them in the freezer overnight, because that breaks down the outer cell wall. And then when I put it outside in my compost pile, I put some leaves over it, and I don't get any animals going in there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Now we have a question from the chat. What do you do with your compost during the winter or during a freeze?
Well, I just continue doing what I'm doing, and I keep a garbage can full of leaves right next to my compost pile. So I put my kitchen scraps on the compost pile and put some leaves on top of it. The leaves don't freeze.
And so you don't have to worry about it if the weather turns bad and it gets really cold. It's not going to impact your compost.
No.
Okay.
It just takes longer to
Takes a little longer
decompose.
because it doesn't stay. It cools down.
Right. Cool compost.
Cool compost. So then it's a slower process. And then when it warms back up, it heats back up again. And
Right.
Okay. All right. Looks like we're getting some type of your phone. We're getting some type of message on our phones, maybe a weather advisory or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Probably everybody looking at this from home, their phones are going off too. One other question is about watering. Well, I have a question, and then there was another question in the chat. How often should you water your compost?
Oh, this is good. Living organisms like water. They need water. And so you put enough water in so that your compost is as wet as a wrung out sponge. And you want that water to be go all the way down to your compost pile. So when I add water, I stir it up with a pitchfork somewhat, or just poke holes in it. If you have a garbage can, poke holes in it so that water will go down.
So a good idea is to tie together watering and turning the compost.
Yeah.
Water it and turn it, and then that evenly distributes the water and make sure that it doesn't get too soaked.
That's
that
good.
everything's watered
Right.
About the same.
Too much water is no good,
Mm-hmm.
but make it as wet as a wrung out sponge.
Got it. That's a really good comparison.
Yeah, that's what A&M uses.
Yeah. And you're okay if you turn it once a month. I think I heard you say in your talk.
Well, maybe you don't even want to turn it at all. Lazy gardener.
And then you turn it to speed up the process a little.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay. Let me see. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I guess we'll wrap it up and tell you thank you so much. For those of you that are still listening, Ellen has been a master gardener, and she's been an expert on compost out at our demonstration gardens bees for a very long time. And we've all learned a lot from her experience. So Ellen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you to Lenora. And thank you, Paul.
All right. And as people are leaving, just remember that they're pinned in the chat is the survey. Please take the survey. Give us some feedback on our garden lectures, any ideas that you have for future garden lectures. And also, when you turn in the survey, you'll get a copy of the presentation. So send in your survey. It'll help us, and we'll get you a copy of Ellen's presentation. Thank you, everyone.